other overall thoughts I had for this week in general, I'll just go with the entire week. The U.S. kept clean sheets all week. They only held opponents to 2 shots on goal all week. I think they had 1 against Portugal and they had 1 against Nigeria, which, wow, it's unbelievable the fact that they just hold opponents to not only almost never having the ball, but never even really getting a shot off. And just, they never, this week, they never let their opponents have more than 35% possession. The team that had that possession percentage was Portugal. And it seems to be pretty par for the course for them this year. They rarely let their opponents get a chance at goal. They have outscored their opponents now by a lot. It's got to be 70-4, I think it is, if my math isn't off. So, which it very well could be since the last time I checked it. But really interesting that the U.S. defensively has just utterly dominated it. It's very eye-opening to see just how good they are and why their back line is so solidified as well. And I want to say another thing I felt too this week was despite the U.S. having the ball the majority of the time, I think 2 out of the 3 of the games felt a lot closer than what they appeared to be. I'm mainly referring to the Portugal and Nigeria game. When you're a fan watching these games, it's like the U.S. always had the ball, but it's like they never felt like they were dominating in either of those games. Like it always felt like Nigeria and Portugal put in a shift and hung in there the entire time. Did I think Portugal and Nigeria had a chance to win either game? Not particularly, no, but I think that a draw was in the cards against Portugal especially, and it was really weird having that feeling, just the feeling of having the game feel a lot closer than what it might have been on the field. So some food for thought there. I don't know if it has something to do with Julie Ertz being that really big presence in the midfield and just bossing everybody. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. And actually, with Julie Ertz being gone in these last few games, I'm surprised that the U.S. didn't feel her presence or her absence a lot more this week without her. Because, I mean, the reality of it is, no matter how you slice it, to me, Julie Ertz is a top 10 player in the world. And anytime you lose a top 10 player in the world, it's going to affect your team, at least in some way. And especially so in Julie Ertz's case, because nobody does what Julie Ertz does. She plays in that central midfield role. She's a stunning header of the ball on set pieces. She wins every midfield battle. She wins most aerial battles, and she has some bone-crunching tackles and clearances in defense. Nobody does those combinations of things like Julie Ertz, and especially for such a team as good as the U.S., she, I think, is the most valuable player of all in the team. So, but then again, like I've said before, and I'll say it again, great teams cope with great loss, and the U.S. have continued to do that throughout this week, even with Julia Ertz gone, so good on them for that. Another thing I noticed that Kristin Press continues to dominate. She won Woman of the Match all 3 matches this week, and I would say rightfully so. She scored 2 goals, had 3 assists, meaning that she was involved in 5 of the 7 U.S. goals this week, and that is no small feat whatsoever. That is a lot of goal involvement. If my math is right, that's about 86% of goals Kristin Press was involved in, and you could make an argument that she won the PK for Lindsey Horan in the game against Jamaica, so that could be another check mark in that regard. But one thing I actually want to clarify too while I'm on that subject, I looked this up before I started the podcast because I actually did not know the answer to this myself. If a player wins a penalty, so in this case, Kristin Press won the penalty for the U.S. against Jamaica, and Lindsey Horan scored it. Kristin Press isn't credited with the assist in that regard. I don't know if any of you knew that or if I should have known that as a footballing fan, but I guess it's never crossed my mind before, so in case any of you didn't know that, I just wanted to bring it up here just in case it helps. So I hope that helps, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so another point that I noticed, and I think this will be my last point for the week, the front line, I think, struggled a little bit with the U.S., especially in the game against Portugal. It would seem that the U.S. had like a couple of sitting opportunities in front of goal, and they shot wide. They didn't make the most of their chances. It felt like they were a slight bit wasteful in the front line, at least for 2 out of the 3 games, that being the Portugal and the Nigeria game. It's like they weren't really quite clicking on all cylinders all the time. And like I said a little bit earlier on this episode, it's like I can't expect perfection every time, and great teams can cope with not performing as well. The best teams in the world still find a way to win despite their struggles. But when I was writing this point down in my notes for the episode, I still think that they struggled, but it's really hard for me to say that because of the fact that they scored 7 goals in 3 games. Like, that's, by and large, when you're looking at it from a normal standpoint, that's pretty great. When you're scoring 2 1/3 goals per per game. Like that usually isn't the sign of a struggling forward line. But in this case, I have to say it seemed that the forward line struggled at least a little bit in 2 out of 3 of these games. And I don't know if it was for the reasons that club play is going on right now, and they've got to go from club play to international, back to club play, back to international, and that wears on players after a while, because we did just come off of a year where they didn't have to play nearly as much. So it can be the mental toughness that goes into that is unprecedented too. So maybe I'm being a little bit harsh in that area, but that's just what I've pretty much observed throughout the week as well. So